People say the mind protects you from what it can't explain. Mine started writing everything down. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 41 years old and I count things for a living. Units shipped, pallets staged, trucks dispatched, signatures collected. I work nights as an operations supervisor for a distribution center that sleeps less than hospitals and more than lies. The floor is concrete, the air is numbers, and every problem looks better in a spreadsheet. You'd think that would prepare a man for truth. It does not. My wife is Rachel. She's 37, a neonatal nurse who learned how to hold the fragilest people without showing the room what it costs. We met 12 years ago in a grocery store, both of us reaching for the same package of coffee and apologizing like we were already married. She laughed with her whole face. When we moved into our townhouse on Millridge, she hung a wind chime by the back door and said, "Let's not forget to hear things." She meant birds. I didn't know then what else there was to hear. The last night I saw her was in June, the kind of evening the neighborhood pretends to be a postcard. Grill smoke, sprinkler arcs, a child's scream that means joy. We ate late. She talked about a baby who finally held temperature on his own, and the attending who brought in lemon bars like a bribe against despair. At 9:30, she said she needed fresh air. She kissed my jaw and went for a walk. At 10:30, I texted, "You good?" At 10:31, the rectangle on my screen stayed gray. At 11, I called. It rang to voicemail. "Hey, it's Rach. Say the thing." She didn't come home. People ask if I knew then, if the air changed texture, if something in the house cracked like ice in a glass. What happened was smaller. I took her windbreaker off the back of the chair and felt its weight. I stood in the kitchen listening to the refrigerator decide how cold to be and waited for the door like a dog. At midnight, I drove the loop we always walk down to the retention pond, back through Monroe, past the old elm that leans like a story. The night had the indifferent look of nights that aren't going to be helpful. At 1, I called the hospital. She'd left at 6. At 1:10, I called the police. They were kind, which made me angrier than if they had been brisk. "Adults can leave," the officer said gently. "Give it until morning." Sleep came like a prank. At 7 a.m., sunlight filled the kitchen with the smell of coffee I hadn't made. I was standing in the doorway when my phone dinged. A calendar reminder, Rachel's Blue Hour Run, an event she set months ago when she wanted to do early jogs with a group at the park. She never went. We made jokes about aspirational calendars. The reminder hit now like a bell dropped down a well. Blue Hour, the time before dawn, when the world holds its breath and colors learn their names again. I called her sister. I called the unit charge nurse. I called the one friend we still see monthly because we are responsible with our loneliness. At 9, I filed a missing person report. They asked for a recent photo. I sent one from a Sunday, her hair a mess, her mouth full of a laugh at something I can't remember. There is nothing crueler than not remembering the joke. By noon, I had a list. I'm good at lists. Recent stressors? None. Money missing? No. Bags packed? Not unless she packed a bag with the same faith she packed the hospital go bag for me when my appendix tried to quit. Was there trouble in the marriage? People asked this softly, like it was a dog you weren't sure would bite. I said no. The truth was more complicated. We were a quiet couple with separate nights. We had separate playlists and one joint checking account. We had tried for a child and learned the alphabet of a grief I will not put in your mouth. But there was no fight at our table. There was no slam door. She walked out into air she trusted and did not return. At 3 in the afternoon, a message arrived from an unknown number. No name, just a photo of the retention pond. The surface was still. The far bank held the ghost of a bench. Over the photo, she liked the Blue Hour. Did you? I called the number. It rang twice, then a voicemail beep with no recorded greeting. I called again. Same. The detective assigned to our case, Rojas, calm to the point of abrasion, took my phone into his palm like a mechanic taking a tool. "Don't answer unknown," he said. "If they want you off balance, don't give them your feet." He asked me to go over our last day again, and then the day before, and then the week. The repetition made me precise. Precision made me feel like I was helping. It is a dangerous trade. At 5, I started the ledger. It wasn't a journal. Journals are for people who want to be the main character. This was a ledger: dates, times, locations, texts. I titled it Blue Hour because humor survives by becoming bookkeeping. Page 1, June 18th, 2126, R to D, walk, kiss. 2130, R exits via back door, wearing gray hoodie, black leggings, Nike Pegasus, blue. 2231, D to R. You good? No reply. 2302, called R, VM 007, patrol car lights down block, unrelated, fight at 12. 0103, drove loop, Monroe, Pond, Elm, no sign. 07, Arges Raro, calendar, Blue Hour run, Rachel. 1205, unknown text photo of Pond with caption. When you start to count the day, you see weird arithmetic. For example, our backdoor camera, which I installed myself and trust the way men trust fixes they made alone, recorded a clip at 2131 of the shadow of a person leaving, her shape. But the front porch camera, motion activated and smug, recorded nothing at 2135 when she would have passed, if she took our usual route. At 2143, the driveway camera recorded headlights sweeping, a car turning around in our cul-de-sac then leaving. Resolution too bad to make a make. At 2212, the backyard camera recorded a small figure crouching by the fence, then nothing. At 2:15, the front camera flickered like a cough. I sent it all to Rojas. He said words like preliminary and will canvass and sit tight, and I wanted to break my phone against the counter just to own a noise. Night 1 without her was a bureaucratic silence. Friends dropped off food as if casseroles could decode. I tried to eat. Forks sounded wrong. I tried to sleep. The bed argued. On day 2, I went to the park at 5 in the morning because I am suggestible and the calendar invite had dug its claws into a part of my brain I thought adulthood had armored. The blue hour is real. The sky finds a sorrowed color and the edges of things look relieved to be seen again. The park was the kind of empty that scares you about your lungs. A runner passed who nodded in that monastic way runners consent to acknowledging others exist. I sat on the bench by the pond and watched the exact place in the photo, which looked like itself but not. The phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Daniel? The voice was a woman's, not Rachel. Young, tired, practiced at soft. Yes. You don't know me. My name is Aaron. A pause. This is going to sound not enough. But I saw Rachel the morning before she went missing. She was at the hospital cafeteria, looking at the board. She said, I'm going to go to the Blue Hour and think about a door. A door? I asked, writing it in the ledger without meaning my hand to. She didn't explain. I didn't ask. People there talk like that sometimes. The voice caught like it forgot which script it was using. She was kind. I wish I had more to give you. Why are you calling? Because the nurses board has your missing flyer, and because the boys on nights are saying a lot more than they know. I thought maybe you should have at least this little true thing too. I thanked her. I added the sentence to the ledger. Door, Blue Hour, think. The words sat there like chairs I couldn't move. On day 3, someone slid an envelope under our door while I was upstairs searching the top of the closet for a hiking pack she never actually used. It held a single printed page, a simple map of our neighborhood with 3 paths marked in blue highlighter, all leading away from our street and toward the park. On the bottom in a narrow, careful hand, check the culverts, not the obvious ones. No signature. The paper smelled faintly of lemon. I walked those paths like a pilgrim. The culverts were taller than I wanted them to be. I shined my phone light into mouths that had swallowed leaves and wrappers and the occasional beer. I found nothing but fear. I went home with mud on my shoes and a resolve that looked like self-harm. Rojas told me gently to stop investigating. People fall into their own theories, he said. Don't be your own hole. On day 4, an old man knocked on my door like he had reheated something and wanted to share. Mercer? He asked, still on the step. I live on Monroe, 2 courts over. He pulled a folded index card from his wallet like a magic trick no one had enjoyed in years. I write down plates when I can't sleep. Helps me pretend I'll spot the villains. Stupid habit. He handed me the card. On it, a few scribbles, dates, times. One entry circled, 2211, blue 7H8, temp. Blue something 8, I read. Blue plates this month start blue, he said, apologetic. Could have been a T, could have been an F. Don't go saying I solved anything. My daughter says I should stop doing this. I won't say anything, I said, which was untrue. I told Rojas. He sighed a kind sigh and wrote it down like a man collecting well-meaning pebbles. By day 5, my ledger had become more real than my job. I called in nights. My boss, who is a practical person, married to his own denial, said, fine, we'll survive without you until Monday. I circled the hours of the day at which the house made its noises. The refrigerator at 07, the HVAC at 22, the neighbor's garage at 35. At 2:16 a.m., our landline rang once. It has rung maybe 8 times in 6 years. We use it for pizza coupons and to give to stores we don't want to email us. It rang once and stopped. At 2:18, it rang again. I answered. Silence. Then a breath, small and doubled, like someone had their hand over the receiver. Then a voice, not disguising itself, but not offering a name. A man's voice, mid-40s maybe, machine-oiled, polite. Mr. Mercer? Yes. You're writing things down, he said pleasantly. I am. That's good. Writing makes it bearable. He exhaled. There's a shed on the far side of the park. Not the city's, the private one. The woman who owns it keeps a blue canoe on hooks. At the back of the shed, there's a panel that doesn't mind remembering. At 6 in the morning, the dog walkers are clumped on the east path looking at their phones. Use that. Who is this? A person who owes Rachel a decent hour, he said, and the line clicked. I didn't go then. I stood in the kitchen with the phone against my chest until the dial tone asserted its shrill authority. At 6, I went to the park. There is indeed a chain-link fence on the far side, and behind it, 3 private sheds belonging to 3 houses with back gates. The middle shed had blue paint peeling like a sunburn. The canoe hung like a museum piece. At the back, a panel was newer than the planks around it. 2 screws already loosened. Inside, a small waterproof bag with nothing in it but air and the smell of plastic, as if it had delivered something and forgot to forget. I sat on the floor of the shed and cried like I was being paid. When I got home, a note waited under the wind chime. You're being watched. Don't turn into a movie. The handwriting was familiar. I stared until my brain found it. Our grocery list. Rachel's numbers. Her careful 4s. I took a photo. I texted her number. If this is you, please, please. It didn't bounce. It didn't deliver either. I put the note into the ledger sleeve and went to work for the first time in a week, because otherwise the day would become a room with no doors. At the warehouse, I lasted 2 hours before I was in the break room with my head in my hands. Troy from second shift brought me coffee without talking to me like I was a wildlife rescue. He left his headphones on the table. If you don't want to hear other people think, he said. When I got home, the front porch light was on. I left it off in the morning. The switch was upstairs. The bulb didn't have a sensor. The house had learned a new trick. I made a note in the ledger. June 23rd, 19:10. Porch light on, not by D. 19:14, porch cam doesn't capture source. 19:22, unknown text. Keep it on. I showed everything to Rojas, who slid it into his file like it could help but wouldn't. He had the decency to be honest. Sometimes they send you on errands to make themselves feel like the sky is still attached to the ground. Sometimes they save you from what you might have done to yourself looking alone. I don't know which we have here. On day 7, I started seeing the white SUV. It idled 2 houses down with the air of a car, whose driver believes he makes neighborhoods safer by taking up space in them. The first time I noticed it, I walked past it toward the mailbox across the street and pretended to do battle with junk mail. The driver didn't look up. He wore a baseball cap and the resignation of a man who does not get paid for what he thinks he's doing. He came mornings after that, always between 6 and 7. Rachel's blue hour had become a schedule for men with hats. At 6:40 one morning, the SUV eased forward as I turned back toward our driveway. You Daniel? He asked through the crack of a rolled-down window. Sometimes, I said. She helped my sister once, he said. He had a face like someone out of a Bible story that wanted scared men to trust him. Rachel, is she, I began, alive? He nodded like a man considering how best to not be helpful. Last I heard, the kind of work she does, you don't get to ask for updates. You get to be glad when the phone doesn't ring. What work? He tapped the steering wheel like it could pick the sentence. Getting people to the other side of the week. He drove away before I could decide if people meant babies or women or men like him. I brought this to Rojas too. He wrote white SUV and underlined it. If you start your own search party, I'll have to start treating you like the kind of idiot who gets himself hurt, he said with kindness. Let us do our job. I wanted to say please do it faster and didn't, because I still wanted to be the kind of citizen who gets a response instead of a door. I went to the hospital to stand in the hallway and pretend to need a water fountain. Nurses have a way of recognizing men almost broken, but still trying to look like chairs. A woman with a badge that said, M. asked if I needed help. Water, I said. Then, Rachel. Her eyes warmed without a change in temperature. She's very good at making things breathe, she said. Sometimes she forgets to do it for herself. Do you know where she is? No one knows where anyone is, she said. That's partly the point. Point of what? She handed me a cup, and because she was beautiful and firm, I took it. If she comes back, she said, don't ask her for an explanation, so good it breaks her. She walked away without the flourish of people who enjoy mystery. That night the landline rang once at 2:16. I let it go. At 2:19 it rang again. I answered. You checked the shed, the man's voice said, not a question. I did. Good. She wanted you to know you weren't crazy. I don't need help with that, I said, and surprised myself by how tired I sounded. She also wanted you to know something else. The pause was a small room. You're going to find a ledger if you look where you don't want to. I've already got one, I said. Not your, he said, hers. The line folded ends and disappeared. I didn't want to know where not to want to look. I looked anyway. The house had a few places that belonged to Rachel more than to me. The narrow top shelf in the laundry closet where we keep cleaning products we never use in shame. The hollow behind the bookshelf where she once hid a bottle of decent whiskey from her father's visit. The inside of her nightstand, top drawer, under the velvet lining she'd scored off Etsy like it could convince a cheap drawer to be rich. It was under the towel drawer, the one I had tightened the slider on last winter. The drawer came out with a convincing protest. Behind it, taped to the underside of the cabinet, a notebook, thin, covered in the kind of blue canvas schools use for lab books because they are cheap and honest. Blue Hour on the front in her careful hand, like a joke we might have both enjoyed if it weren't this. I didn't open it. I sat in the hallway on the carpet as if grief were wet paint, and I didn't stand up until the hallway color let me. When I did open it, the first page wrecked me for an hour and then rebuilt me into a man who could keep reading. It was lists. Rachel was a list person, 2 dates in names and words that needed wings. Lena, 5 a.m. Inhaler, Jenna, 2 a.m. Safe House, West. Wednesdays, porch lights. Moth, if it rings twice, answer. Dog lady at pond, 6:20, says hi to everyone. Aaron, door. And then scrawled on its own line, circled twice. D ledger. I flipped. More pages, more names, initials. A small map of our neighborhood so similar to the one that had been slid under our door that my breath forgot to be polite. A folded photograph of the back entrance to the hospital with arrows that meant nothing to me and everything to the person who drew them. On the last page, a sentence. If I need to be gone, I will be. If I can't come back, pretend I could have and be kind to that version. I called Rojas. I told him I found a notebook. I did not tell him what it said, because I am not stupid, just late. He asked to see it. I said no. He sighed, and his sigh said he had already known the answer. For a week after that, the house became a code book. The porch light flicked in 2s and 3s that I pretended were numbers I could make into words. The landline rang once, twice, then stopped for 3 nights as if it were teaching me what my hands did when they were empty. The white SUV came and went in a way that felt like taking attendance. People left sandwiches on my stoop like I was a shore that always needed feeding. On a Tuesday, Rojas came with a partner I hadn't met, and two sentences that felt like the countertop under my hands had decided to be a floor. A body was recovered downriver, he said. Female, mid-30s, clothing, similar. He was careful with the word similar, the way surgeons are careful with sutures. He asked me to come to the medical examiner's office, and then, when I didn't stand, he said I didn't have to. It wasn't her. This was both a kindness and a second drowning. I cried without making the face men make when they want to look like they've been crying for reasons that earn them a hug. Rojas put a hand on the back of the chair and left it there an entire minute. I need you to keep living, he said. That's the only way she gets to keep doing it too. That night the landline did not ring. The porch light stayed off. The wind chime made a sound like someone tuning a small machine no one had ordered. I opened the ledger and wrote, June 30th, 19, not her. 1901, this is both better and worse. 1902, I am not writing that again. On July 4th, I sat on the porch while the neighborhood practiced being happy with explosives. A sparkler drew cursive in the air and a child spelled nothing comprehensible. A woman I didn't know walked up our path with the calm of a person who knows you will not invite her in. Daniel, she said, I'm Moth. Her hair was cut blunt. Her eyes read rooms first, people second. She wore a gray sweater even though it was hot, which I think was armor against the part of the world that thinks familiarity is owed. She held a paper bag. Rachel told me you'd start a ledger, she said, not unkindly. She said you'd probably call it something you want to hate. Blue Hour, I said. 2 on the nose, she said, approving without smiling. She handed me the bag. Inside, a phone, the dowdy kind you buy in places without credit checks and a charger. When the landline rings once and then twice, she said, plug this in. It will know what to do. Is she? She is doing the thing she does, Moth said. I'm asking you to keep doing the thing you can. What is that? Be a place. She glanced at the house like it was a person who had already passed her test. Keep the porch light random. Keep a chair by the door. Don't demand an ending you haven't earned. I want her to come home. She will, Moth said, or she won't. She looked at me like a teacher throwing away the lesson plan because someone needed a different sentence. There are worse fates than not knowing. Knowing the wrong thing is worse. Who is the man who calls? A decent mistake, she said. We don't keep his name in our mouths. Why me? Moth tilted her head. Because you're boring, she said. Because you write things down. Because when the house needs someone to not make a show, it chooses the person who knows how to be furniture without becoming invisible. She put a business card on the arm of the chair. No company. No title. Just a number and a small moth printed in ink the color of secrets. If the porch light won't turn off, flip the breaker. Don't wait for it to teach you. For a while after that, the days had a shape. Work, sit on porch, answer calls when the pattern told me to, add lines to the ledger, fail to sleep at respectable hours. Friends drifted away because grief in installments is a subscription model only a few can afford. Rojas came by once every 3 days to be sure I had not built a room out of my head and moved in. I had, but I brought a window. On a Wednesday, someone chalked "come home" on our sidewalk in letters that looked like a child who had practiced. I took a photo and then hosed it off because I didn't want Rachel to think I had started a church. In August, my boss asked me to return to nights. You don't have to be useful here, he said, which is his way of being kind. I went back because it helped to order pallets and move trucks and tell men twice my size to wait their turn. The warehouse holds a music of competence. It loaned me some. At 2:15 a.m. on August 19th, the landline rang once, then twice. I plugged in the little phone. It woke with no startup chime, no brand page, just a blue background and a message. Get in the car, engine running, Front Street. 2:22. I grabbed my keys, ran down the stairs, and stopped on the bottom step because sometimes instructions are traps, and sometimes they are taxes, and sometimes they are both. I got in the car. I drove to Front Street. A sedan idled, amazing itself by not being noticed, 3 spots back from the farthest light. A shadow moved in the passenger seat, and then a figure got out and walked to my window. I rolled it down. I smelled cheap soap and the air wars of late summer. She wore a cap and a mask like a person who wanted to be both unseen and not alarming. She was not Rachel. "Mr. Mercer?" she asked. "Yes." She handed me a brown envelope like a man handing over rent. She said, "Give you these if you came alone." The woman looked both ways, the way people in movies look both ways when someone cheap is telling them to. "If you didn't come alone, I was supposed to eat them." "I came alone," I said, and my voice broke on the word like a shoe on a step you didn't see. She walked away without theatricality. I opened the envelope. Inside, 3 Polaroids. Rachel in mid-step, in 3 different places behind the hospital, at the back of a strip mall I didn't know we owned as a town, and on a footbridge over a creek that eats shopping carts in spring. In each, she looked left, then right, then into the lens like she knew the camera was a person. On the back of the last one, "I am not gone. Hold the door." I brought them home and put them in the ledger under a plastic sleeve like I was cataloging museum pieces. I slept 2 hours that felt like permission. I woke afraid the pictures had taught my brain to be stupid. I went to work because men like me require tasks to be decent. On the first Sunday in September, the white SUV did not come. On Monday, it didn't either. On Tuesday, a different car did, a sedan with plates from 2 counties over. The driver did not look like he believed in fences. He parked one house past ours, got out, walked to our porch, took a photo of our wind chime, and left. I called Rojas. He said he'd send a cruiser. It cruised. The sedan didn't return. That night, as I stood at the sink pretending to wash a dish, the porch light turned itself on. It stayed on for 3 seconds, then off, then on, then off, twice. The landline rang once. I plugged in the little phone. It lit, blue and blank, and then a text appeared. "If the porch light blinks twice, do not answer the door." I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I put them in my pockets like a safe. 5 minutes later, someone knocked, polite. I stood still, a man learning he had another way to breathe. The person on the other side of the door sighed. 30 seconds later, the knock came again, less polite. I went to the peephole. A man in a baseball cap. Funny how hats are uniforms for people who don't want to admit it. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his mouth to the door. "City Utilities. We're checking porch wiring anomalies." "Schedule an appointment," I said through the wood. "We can do it now." "You can do it Wednesday at 10, I said, and felt ridiculous and correct. He laughed like men laugh when the joke is the idea of you saying no. The porch light blinked twice on its own and then went out. He left. The next day, the little phone read, "Good." I answered, "Is she safe?" No reply. 2 weeks later, Rojas told me something that reassembled the floor plan of my head. She accessed a locker at the bus station a week before she disappeared. He said, "Key rented under a pseudonym. Inside were prepaid phones and a list of 17 names." 17? "We're tracking them down. We have 3. One is a woman in witness protection. No, I can't tell you where. One is a nurse at the county clinic. One is a man from the white SUV. The white SUV man talked to me," I said. "Good," Rojas said. "Talk less back. What about the others?" He looked at me like a person who resigned from the job of telling me everything. "We're working it." "Do you think she's running?" He took a breath. "I think she's helping people who are running, which looks exactly like running to anyone who only wants one sentence." He put his hat back on. Detectives are required to have hats as part of theater. "Do you need a sentence?" "I need a door," I said. He nodded like he had once been married to a person who knew how to find them. By October, I had learned too much about empty hours. The ledger had reached page 47. I started writing better. I stopped writing to myself. The porch light had 3 patterns, steady, flicker, flicker, and a slow rise I called candle. The landline had 2. Moth had 1. The little phone had none. The white SUV didn't come again. The blue canoe in the shed moved down a hook like someone had taken its weight and put it back. The child on the block spelled something new with sparklers, and I still can't read it. On October 19th at 2:22 a.m., the landline rang once and then again. I plugged in the little phone. It lit and then, instead of a message, a call. Unknown. I answered. "It's time," Moth said. "Blue hour. Bridge." The footbridge? The one that collects shopping carts. She hung up. I drove because I am now the kind of man who drives when the woman with the gray sweater uses a sentence. The sky had not yet thought about light. The creek sounded like an argument 2 doors down. I stood on the bridge and waited for the kind of movie scene I had been explicitly warned not to try to live. No one came. At 5:58, a runner stopped, stretched, pretended to tie a shoe, then said without turning, "She told me you would bring a chair to a door you can't see." She stood, still not looking at me. "This is me telling you she hasn't fallen." "Is she?" "She's doing it," the runner said. "If you want her back the way you remember her, then you don't really want her back." I cried again, not dramatically. The runner jogged away. At 6:18, the sky decided to keep the town. On the east side of the creek, a child in a red coat threw a stick, and a dog argued with physics. A man I didn't know sat on a bench and did not look at the water. I went home and made coffee and put the cup next to Rachel's mug, which is ridiculous, but if you stop doing ridiculous things, you stop being a person. At 7, the wind chime made a note, and then 3. Under it, where notes and parcels had begun to prefer, a single Polaroid waited. Rachel, closer than the last ones, her face in half-light, hair tucked under a cap, eyes not sorry. On the back, in her careful hand. The mind protects you by pretending you can't know. You can. Not everything, but this. I chose this. You did not lose me. I got bigger. Parkour. I don't know how this ends. That is the ending. I can give you what I have. The ledger on my kitchen table, the porch light that sometimes performs a language and sometimes is just a bulb. The landline that teaches me patience I didn't want. The gray sweater woman who brings me useful sentences and not enough comfort. A detective with a hat who does his job like a person and not like TV. A shed with a blue canoe and a panel that is done remembering. And a wife who may walk back through my door next Wednesday at 2:15 a.m. and ask if we have coffee, or may not, ever. I have learned to be a place instead of a question. I change the light bulb before it burns out. I set the wind chime on its hook when the wind wants to steal it. I write the days into the ledger because the mind will forget cleverly if you let it. I go to work. I count pallets. I eat. I wave to the children who have decided I am either sad or mythic or both. I water the single plant Rachel bought and neglected, and then remembered for a month straight. I stand on the back step in the blue hour and learn the names of the colors I had ignored. If the porch light blinks twice tonight, I will not open the door. If it stays steady, I will. If the landline rings once and then again, I will plug in the little phone. If it doesn't, I will not invent a reason to be the hero. Hope is not a plan. It is a posture. I practice it when no one is watching and when I am tempted to write an ending into the ledger that I do not own. If she comes back, I will try not to ask for a story she cannot tell without breaking. If she doesn't, I will try to believe I was not left. I was trusted with a chair by a door. Blue hours when the world admits it's more than one thing. I am learning to be more than one thing too. Husband and hinge, witness and furniture, the man who stands at the window without needing to be the one who opens it. I have set out 2 mugs because that is the shape of my faith. The ledger is open. The wind is up. The phone is face down. The door is closed. The light knows what to do. Enjoyed the story? Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next dark, twisty tale. Your support helps more stories find the right ears.